everything shifted while you were in recovery. This place isn't yours anymore. You don't belong here. Find another roof." I froze. The incision, still tender, pulsed with pain. I couldn't believe those words came from my only child, the one I'd devoted my life to. I'd only been in the hospital for 3 weeks after complications from hip surgery. I came back, hoping to reunite with my family, only to find the door barred on the home Samuel and I had built, piece by piece, over 30 years. In that second, I recognized the betrayal. It wasn't just losing a house. It hinted at a darker plan I hadn't fully seen. If you've ever wondered what happens when a mother is pushed to her absolute limit, keep listening and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. My discharge forms crackled in my pocket as the taxi rolled up to my old-style home. 21 days felt endless. Post-op complications had me fighting fever and infection, while the world carried on without me. I was drained, but relieved to be back. Home. The two-story house Samuel and I lovingly restored over 3 decades stood ahead, glowing in late daylight. The roses I planted years ago still bloomed by the path, though they needed a gardener's hand after my absence. "Need help with your bags, ma'am?" the driver asked, eyeing my cane. "Just to the stoop, please," I answered, voice rough from hospital air. "My son should be waiting." The front door opened before we reached it. Ethan, my only son, stood there, but not with the welcome I expected. His face wore a look I'd never seen: cool, remote, decided. His tone matched, dry and formal. Behind him, a flicker of movement in the living room. His wife, Natalie. And her parents? "Ethan, what's this?" I asked, stepping forward. He blocked the entry, refusing to move. "You shouldn't have come. We thought you'd be here tomorrow." The driver set my small suitcase down, sensing the tension. I paid quickly, wishing he wouldn't drive off. "No easy way to put it," Ethan went on as the taxi pulled away. "Things changed while you were hospitalized. This house isn't yours anymore." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with recovery. "What are you saying?" "We made arrangements." Natalie's parents needed to relocate from Dallas, and this place is far more than you need. Papers are signed. You'll have to find somewhere else to live. My mind tried to catch the meaning. Papers? I hadn't signed a thing. "Ethan, this is ridiculous. Let me into my home." I stepped forward, leaning on my cane. This time, Natalie appeared at his side. Blonde hair perfectly set. She wore my emerald earrings, Samuel's gift for our 25th. "Elena," she cooed with that practiced sweetness I'd learned to read. "We've boxed up your personal items. They're in the garage. We can ship them wherever you're staying." Behind them, Natalie's parents, Victor and Lila Conway, emerged. Over the years, I'd only seen them a handful of times. Victor, tall, trim, silver-haired, always struck me as smug. Lila, with that perpetual look of judgment, never hid her disdain for my modest home, the same one she now stood in like she owned it. "Unfortunate it came to this," Victor said, not sounding sorry at all. But Ethan made everything clear. The property was transferred legally. "Legally?" I managed. "That's impossible." "I never signed anything." Ethan's face hardened. "Power of attorney. Remember the packet you signed before surgery for medical decisions? It included finances." The hit landed like a punch. Yes, I'd signed a stack of pages, handed to me by my own son. Anxious about the operation, I trusted him completely. I didn't read past page 1. "You tricked me," I said. The words felt small compared to the scale of the betrayal. We're doing what's best for everyone. Natalie cut in. This place is too much for you alone. Ethan's managed it for years. Don't come back, Mom. Ethan finished flatly. We'll send your things. It's final. I stood there, braced on my cane, staring at the boy I'd raised, the child I'd told stories to, the teen I'd taught to drive, the man whose tuition I covered working extra shifts. Now, stranger wearing my son's face. This is unlawful, I said softly, and you know it. It's done, he replied coldly. Don't make it worse. Something gave way inside me, but not how they expected. No tears, no begging. Instead, a cold clarity I hadn't felt since my years in bank compliance. Enjoy it then, I said, turning away. Enjoy everything. The bewilderment on their faces at my calm was almost worth the pain. Almost. I limped toward the taxi. Thankfully, I had asked the driver to wait. I pulled out my phone, not to call the police. Not yet. That would come on my terms, in my time. I sent one message to Carmen Blake. Plan B, the downtown. Phoenix hotel room was impersonal but clean, a temporary refuge while I regained strength and focus. My hands still shook as I sat on the bed and stared at my phone. Carmen replied immediately, Stay safe. On my way, we'd been friends 40 years, since college. She became a formidable attorney. I built a career in bank compliance. After Samuel passed, she helped me organize everything with the kind of meticulous caution we both respected. Always keep a backup plan, she'd warned, especially with family money. I'd thought she was being dramatic. Tonight, it felt prophetic. A soft knock announced her arrival. Even at this hour, Carmen looked sharp in a tailored suit, silver hair pulled into her signature bun. Her expression, though, was furious. Those shameless vultures, she hissed, hugging me gently, mindful of my hip. Are you okay? Physically or emotionally? I tried a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Both. She set her briefcase on the desk and began laying out files with practiced efficiency. I'm upright. That's something. The rest. I sank back on the bed. I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will be a fever dream. Her features softened. Then she put the lawyer mask back on. I've already started. The trust is solid. Samuel was precise. The transfer won't survive scrutiny. How long? I asked. To void a fraudulent conveyance. Weeks, maybe months if they fight, she said, then paused. But, Elena, there's more. Something I found reviewing your accounts. My stomach clenched. What? Unusual withdrawals from your investments during your hospital stay. Large ones. She handed me a printed statement. My compliance instincts flared. 5 transfers, over $220,000, to accounts I didn't recognize. While I was barely conscious in the ICU, I whispered, they didn't just take my home. They were emptying my savings. Worse, Carmen said. My assistant pulled quick background on the Conways. Their Dallas real estate consulting firm has complaints that vanished before investigations could proceed. And Natalie's work history. 3 mortgage companies that later closed over regulatory violations. The pattern snapped into focus. Mortgage fraud? Carmen nodded. And likely months in the making. Your surgery gave them the perfect window. My thoughts raced back over the last year. Natalie's sudden curiosity about my finances. Ethan's casual questions about bank accounts and contacts. The foundation of this betrayal had been poured long before the operation. Ethan, I said, his name catching. Do you think he knows? Carmen's silence answered me. I taught him better, I murmured. His father did too, she said, steady but kind. People change, especially around money. The question is, what do you want to do? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 67 years career, family, home. When I opened them, something within had set like steel. Everything, I said. I want everything done to reclaim what's mine and bring consequences. Everyone. Ethan included. Carmen arched an eyebrow. No maternal shield? He made his choice, I said, the truth burning as I spoke it. If he broke the law, he faces it. She nodded, satisfied. Then we're smart and surgical. I'll loop in contacts at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. They'll be very interested. I have a few too, I said, thinking of former colleagues. But not yet. They think I'm beaten. A helpless old woman who will fade away. That misread gives us leverage. What's your move? I pulled a small black notebook from my bag, my lifeline from the banking years. First, we document everything, every withdrawal, every forged form, every lie. Then we follow the money. Real schemes leave patterns. Carmen smiled, sharp, predatory, like college days. And then, I said, feeling that cold resolve steady me, we spring the trap when they least expect it. We mapped the plan. My phone buzzed. Ethan, Mom, we need your investment passwords to transfer the rest for your care. Send ASAP? I showed Carmen. She shook her head. What do I reply? I asked. Nothing, she said. Let them stew. I nodded, setting the phone aside. The old Elena would have responded instantly, smoothing conflict at all costs. That Elena had been left on the porch of the house they stole. This Elena was playing long game from a hotel desk. I reconnected with my best friend and attorney, who uncovered the worst. Not only had they seized my home, they were bleeding my accounts while I lay in a hospital bed. And when we turned over the Conway business history, I had to face the brutal possibility that my own son was in something truly dark. Still healing, but firmer in resolve, I chose not to confront them yet. I'd let them believe they'd won, while I built the case that would end them. You need to. See this, Carmen said 3 days later, sliding her laptop over. We'd moved to an extended stay suite, paying cash to leave no trail. My strength edged back. The emotional wounds were raw. On screen, neighborhood property records. Third from the bottom, she said. My eyes widened. The Millers, 2 doors down, sold 3 months ago. Buyer, Conway Urban Properties, LLC. That can't be random, I murmured. There's more, Carmen said, flipping through documents. The Hendersons across the street sold to the same LLC last month. The retired couple on the corner were already under contract, same buyer. They're buying the whole block, I whispered, watching the scheme form. But why? Carmen pulled up a zoning petition, filed 2 weeks earlier, while I was still hospitalized, a request to rezone our block from single-family to mixed-use commercial. The blow landed. We sat at the edge of a booming downtown corridor. With new zoning, values would explode. They're using my house as HQ while they aggregate lots, I said, the puzzle locking together. Once they hold enough, they'll force the change. Values triple, Carmen finished. At current prices, they're eyeing $15 to $20 million. I saw it instantly, but the seed money had to be huge. Where'd they get it? That's the part that's ugly, she said. A friend checked records. The Conways have a Dallas pattern. Target vulnerable owners, seniors or folks in money trouble, push predatory refis, falsify appraisals, structure loans to fail, then scoop up properties cheap. I thought of my neighbors, many elderly, living on pensions in houses they'd held for decades. Perfect targets. And my accounts, those transfers, are their startup capital, I said. They needed cash for early buys and carry. My portfolio was the easy tap. The cruelty stole my breath. It wasn't only my money and home. They were using me to crush my entire community. And Ethan? I asked, finally voicing the fear. How deep is he? Carmen hesitated, then opened another file. Recorded 3 weeks ago at First National Dallas. The video showed Ethan and Natalie meeting a loan officer, time-stamped 2 days after my surgery, while I lay sedated. My chest tightened. They used the power of attorney to access my safe deposit box, I said. I recognized the bank, the one holding my deed and trust. Yes, Carmen said. The access log shows they removed originals. I closed my eyes, briefly overwhelmed. My own son, the boy who once demanded fairness in board games, who returned a wallet with $50 inside. How did he become this? There's something else, Carmen added, showing a chain of emails. For my SEC contact, the Conways have been on the radar. The emails between Natalie and Victor from 8 months back outlined their plans in careful language. Houses on my street, which owners were pliable. And, worst of all, my home as their command center once they controlled it. One line chilled me. Still hesitant, but yielding. Mother unlikely to fully recover from scheduled surgery. Accelerated timeline. Scheduled surgery, I whispered. My hip replacement wasn't an emergency. It had been on the calendar for months. Elena, Carmen said gently, as if bracing me. They were waiting for this. They knew I'd be vulnerable, I said, the truth dawning with dread. They counted on it. We don't know if Ethan understood the full extent, she began. Enough, I said, raising a hand. He knew enough. He knew they wanted my house, my money. He knew they were moving while I was incapacitated. The pain of that certainty cut deeper than any surgical blade. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He'd done it with calculation. I stood, ignoring my hip's complaint, and moved to the window. The Phoenix skyline shone indifferent to my private disaster. What do you want to do? Carmen asked softly. Justice, I said, clear as glass. For me, for my neighbors, and my house back. She nodded. Then we move careful. They think they've already won. That's our advantage. Good, I said. The plan was already forming, because I was about to give them the shock of their lives. As Carmen and I combed records, a pattern emerged. Conways buying homes across the block, anchoring a rezoning play worth millions. The betrayal cut deeper when evidence showed Ethan wasn't just a tag-along. He'd known for months. He might have timed the takeover to my surgery. With my community at risk, my resolve set. It wasn't just about my front door anymore. It was about stopping a sophisticated fraud before more people were harmed. And I was exactly the person who could do it. Are you sure? Carmen asked, watching me put on makeup in the hotel bathroom mirror. You're hip. I spent 21 days helpless, I said, lipstick steady. I'm done being helpless. A week had passed since that doorstep eviction. In that time, we rebuilt the Conways playbook. Their Dallas trail, financial victims, seniors stripped of homes through predatory contracts and forged papers, was now repeating in Phoenix with my house as hub. Timing must be perfect, I reminded her, giving myself a final look. A gray pantsuit, discreet jewelry. The image I wanted. Not a broken widow, but a banking professional with decades of expertise. Agents are in place, Carmen said. They'll move only when we give the signal. We'd taken our dossier to the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. They'd been circling the Conways for months but lacked inside access. We struck a deal. They'd hold immediate arrests so we could gather airtight proof. In return, I'd get priority to recover assets. We need documents showing they used my identity and financial data, I rehearsed. Bank access, forged signatures, explicit acknowledgement of the scheme. Without it, they'll claim I volunteered everything. Carmen checked the time. Natalie's salon slot starts in 30. She'll be gone at least 2 hours. Victor and Lila are at a showing across town. And Ethan, according to his calendar, won't be home until 5 perfect. My son's predictable routine, once endearing, was now my advantage. Let's go. The cab dropped us 2 blocks away. I walked slowly, cane now more prop than necessity. The neighborhood looked the same. Trim lawns, old houses, the massive oak where Ethan built a treehouse. But everything felt different, stained by what I knew. Approaching the house, I spotted changes. My roses replaced with generic shrubs, porch furniture Samuel and I restored. Gone. The erasure had begun. I didn't use the front. I slipped to the side entrance, the kitchen door I'd forgotten to lock in the rush to the hospital. For years, it was our little secret. Teenage Ethan used it to sneak in, thinking I didn't know. The key turned easily. Inside, unfamiliar voices drifted from my study. I moved quietly toward the half-open door. Closing with the Millers is Friday, a man said, Victor's voice. Once that's done, we control 40% of the block. And the Hendersons? Another voice asked, likely a partner. Already squared? We used Mrs. Rivera's banking credentials to secure financing. Clean. My grip tightened on the cane. They were using my name and reputation to fuel their fraud. Exactly the admission we needed. I tapped record on my phone, then pushed the door open. They froze. Victor behind Samuel's antique desk, his partner by the window, staring at me. Hello, Victor, I said evenly. Discussing business in my study? Elena, he snapped, standing. Unexpected. How did you get in? Through a door, I said, to the house that still belongs to me. Legally? The partner shifted, nervous. Should I come back later, Mr. Conway? No need, I answered before Victor could. I'm just picking up personal documents. Victor's face hardened. This property is no longer yours. Ethan was explicit. Yes, I said, strolling to the file cabinet. He was quite clear about his intentions, just like you are about using my banking credentials for your loans. The color drained from his face. I don't know what you mean. I flipped a drawer, pulling a folder. The Henderson file, using my data. I heard you discussing it. The partner edged toward the hall. Mr. Conway, I should... Elena is confused, Victor snapped. Her hospital stay affected her judgment, didn't it, Elena? I smiled coolly, closing the drawer. My mind is crystal clear, clear enough to see what you, Lila, and Natalie are engineering. Clear enough to wonder if Ethan truly understands the consequences he's helping create. His expression shifted, concern melting into naked menace. You have no proof. And even if you did, who would believe you over your own son? Leave before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. You're right about one thing, I said, lifting my phone so he could see the red timer. Proof matters. His eyes flared. Give me the phone. No. I backed toward the door, heart pounding under a calm exterior. I have what I came for. Enjoy the house while you can. He lunged, gripping my arm hard. You're not leaving with that recording. I hadn't expected a physical grab. Pain shot through my hip as I braced. Let go, I said. raising my voice. Hand over the phone, he snarled, reaching with his free hand. The front door burst open. FBI, hands where we can see them. Agents Rowan and Keene swept in, weapons drawn. Victor froze, releasing me and lifting his hands. Our contingency, triggered by the panic button app on my phone, worked perfectly. Elena Rivera? Agent Rowan asked as her partner cuffed Victor. Are you okay? Yes, I said, leaning on the frame. And I think you'll. Like what I recorded. Taking a calculated risk, I returned home during Natalie's salon window and caught Victor mid-plot in my study. When cornered, he turned threatening, forcing the FBI to step in earlier than planned. Even so, I left with what we needed, a clean admission that my credentials were being used in their scheme. As they let him out in cuffs, I knew this was only the start of dismantling everything. The real test would be when Ethan learned who triggered the Conways' fall. The FBI office felt clinically cold. Beige walls, functional chairs, a hum of printers and stale coffee. I waited in an interview room, hip aching despite the extra strength pill Agent Rowan offered. Miss Rivera, Agent Keene said, closing his notebook, your recording is extremely valuable. Combined with the financials you and Ms. Blake brought, we can secure warrants for all Conway properties and records. And my house? I asked. And my accounts? A judge issued an emergency freeze on any transaction tied to your property, he said. No sale or transfer until ownership is clarified. Relief washed through me. This was only the opening move, but it was a crucial one. The Conways were in custody. Ethan and Natalie didn't yet know. What now? We execute search warrants tonight, Rowan said. Mrs. Conway will be taken in too. As for your son, she paused, softening slightly. We'll determine his involvement level. The door opened. Carmen stepped in, serious but satisfied. First court orders had arrived. Simultaneous moves were underway on the Conways' Dallas office. Ms. Rivera, Keene said gently, we understand this is complicated. If you'd rather not be present at your house, I'll be there, I said. It's my home. I'm seeing this through. 3 hours later, I sat in an unmarked car across from my house. Dusk casts long shadows across the lawn where Ethan once played. Natalie's car was in the drive, back from her salon, unaware her father was being processed downtown. In position, Rowan murmured, listening to her comms. Mrs. Conway and your son are inside. They got home early. My heart tightened. I'd hoped to spare Ethan the spectacle. I'd arranged for him to be approached at the office. Now he'd get the full glare beside his wife. Are you sure you want to see this? Carmen asked, covering my hand. Before I answered, a convoy rolled down the street, 3 sedans and a tactical van. Agents poured out in choreographed motion, jackets flashing big yellow letters. Federal agents? Search warrant, an officer called. Clear enough for the block to hear. I couldn't make out the inside exchange, but the door opened. From my angle, I saw Natalie's face shift from puzzled to stunned. Ethan stepped beside her, protective. It's time, Rowan said, opening her door. Stay behind us. Neighbors emerged, drawn by the noise, the curious, and the concerned. Natalie spotted me behind the agents, composure shattering. You! She spat, voice climbing. You did this! Ethan's eyes found mine. His expression morphed from confusion to horror as he realized I was with the agents, not a suspect like them. Mom, he said, voice cracking, what's happening? Your mother provided evidence of significant financial fraud by the Conway family, Agent Keene said formally. We have a warrant to seize devices and documents. Fraud? Ethan echoed, as if the word were new to him. This is insane. What's insane? I said, cane ticking against the walk. Is Victor bragging in my study this morning about using my banking credentials for his loans? Natalie went pale. You were here? How? The side door, I said simply. There are things about this home you never bothered to learn, Natalie. Like that it belongs to a trust my late husband created, and it can't transfer. Without every trustee's signature, including Carmen's. She never signed a thing. Ethan looked between us, panic rising. Mom, this is a misunderstanding. We wanted to help by taking my home, draining my accounts, installing your in-laws as HQ for a block-level scheme, and trading on my financial name? My voice stayed steady. That isn't help, Ethan. It's theft. Mrs. Conway, we need you to come in for questioning, Rowan said, gesturing to a car. I want my attorney, Natalie snapped, reassembling her mask. I won't say a word without counsel. You're right, Keene said, then turned to Ethan. Mr. Cole, we'll need to speak with you as well. I don't understand, he said hollowly. Mom? What have you done? The question, so backward, so blind to his own actions, hit like a slap. What have I done? I said, holding his gaze. Protected myself and others from people who think they can take whatever they want without consequence. I taught you better, Ethan. Your father did too. As agents. Guided Natalie to the car, she twisted back with venom. You think you've won? Wait until my father's attorneys get involved. Your father is already in custody, I said, calmly. Your mother, too. The FBI is in your Dallas offices now. It's over. Natalie. Her face contorted as agents closed the door. Ethan stood on the porch as more agents entered, carrying equipment. Mom, he called as I turned with Carmen. I didn't know everything. Please, believe me, I studied the son I raised, searching his eyes for truth. Maybe you didn't know everything, I said, but you knew enough. And still, you chose them over me. As I walked away, I heard him call, voice breaking. Where am I supposed to go now? I didn't look back. That was the same question I'd faced when he barred me from my own door. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, but, unlike my son, I found no satisfaction in his pain, only a deep sadness for what we'd both lost. While agents searched my home, arrested Natalie, and questioned Ethan, I watched from across the street, torn between vindication and grief. Ethan's shock at learning I orchestrated the takedown turned into frantic denial. Natalie's mask finally shattered, revealing the calculating criminal beneath. And though part of me flinched at Ethan's plea, where do I go now? I recognized the bitter justice. He was tasting what he had forced on me. Some lessons cost dearly. As I turned away from the house I would soon reclaim, I knew this was just the first step toward justice, and maybe one day, healing. Eat, Carmen said, nudging a soup container across the hotel desk we'd turned into an office. 3 days had passed since the operation. 3 days of statements, evidence reviews, hearings. No time to process. No appetite, I said, scanning the latest packet from her office. You haven't eaten properly in days, she insisted. Your body needs strength. She was right. The physical toll and stress had caught up with me. I took a spoonful. Better, Carmen said, relieved. Now, tomorrow's meeting. She meant my first face-to-face with Ethan since the raid. He'd requested it through his public defender, Marcus Reed. He says he didn't grasp the scope of the Conway's operation, Carmen said neutrally. He claims Natalie kept him in the dark and that the power of attorney he slipped in front of you let him move funds for your care. The bitterness in my voice was hard to hide. Amazing how often he's in the dark. I'm not defending him, she said softly, just relaying his counsel's pitch. What does he want? I asked, though I already knew. Officially, nothing. Unofficially, I think he hopes you'll speak to prosecutors for leniency. A mother's voice carries, I set down the spoon. Meeting him sounded unbearable, but I needed answers. How did my son become someone capable of this? The federal interview room was bright and spare. A metal table, uncomfortable chairs, a mirror masking an observation room. I sat with Carmen, hands folded to hide a tremor. When the door opened, I barely recognized the man who walked in. Ethan, usually crisp and composed, looked unmoored. Wrinkled khakis, a plain shirt, stubble on his jaw. Mom, he said, sitting across from me. His lawyer, young, serious, wire rims, took the seat beside him. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice level. Silence stretched. Neither of us knew where to start. Ms. Rivera, Reed finally began. My client asked to clarify some misunderstandings. I'm listening, I said, eyes on Ethan. He cleared his throat. First, I never wanted it to go this far. When Natalie and I discussed her parents moving in, it was meant to be temporary, just until they found a place. And the power of attorney, the one you slipped in with my medical forms, I said. He looked down, ashamed. That was Natalie's idea. She said it was precautionary, in case decisions had to be made while you recovered. You used it to transfer my house and drain my accounts. I said. He hesitated, glanced at his lawyer, who gave a tiny nod. That was Natalie and Victor. They said they were reallocating funds to safer investments for your retirement. I didn't realize they were stealing. I studied his face. Desperation? Fear? Was that remorse? Or just regret at being caught? The house? I said. You told me I couldn't come back. You stood in the doorway of the place your father and I built and said, it wasn't mine. He stared at the table. Natalie convinced me it was best. She said the house was too much, that you'd be happier in a community. He swallowed. I thought. We were helping, he added, ignoring the fact that they tossed me out with a single suitcase and boxed my life in a garage. The calm I'd clung to cracked. That's not help, Ethan. That's cruelty. I know, he murmured. I know now. What do they have on you? I blurted, the question that had clawed at me. Natalie and her parents. What leverage was worth betraying your own mother? Ethan lifted his head, startled. His lawyer shifted. We should focus, Reed began. No, Ethan said. She deserves to know. He drew a long breath. 3 years ago, I made terrible investments. Lost a lot. Our savings. Part of retirement. I was desperate to replace it before Natalie found out. Victor offered help. Secure opportunities. He lent you money? I asked. He nodded, defeated. At first. Then I signed things. Got pulled into their deals without understanding. By the time I realized, I was already in too deep. They had leverage, Carmen said. They had me, Ethan corrected. Natalie made it clear. If I didn't cooperate, her father would make sure I took the fall. I tried to reconcile this with the boy I raised. And my house, my accounts. A loyalty test, he admitted, shoulders sinking. To prove I was committed. Natalie said, when the land was rezoned, we'd make enough to place you somewhere nice. Did you believe that? I asked, unable to hide disbelief. I wanted to, he said quietly. It was easier than admitting what I was doing. The raw honesty cut through me. For the first time since this began, I glimpsed the boy who, when confronted with a lie, would eventually confess, no matter how painful. "What are you asking of me today?" I said gently. He met my eyes. "Nothing. I don't deserve your help or forgiveness. I just needed you to know I never meant to hurt you. I was weak. I was scared. I made awful choices. Whatever comes, I'll face it." The dignity of that answer, so unlike the excuses I'd braced for, disarmed me. A knock interrupted. Agent Rowan stepped in, apologetic. "Sorry. Urgent matter. Miss Rivera, could you step out?" In a sterile federal room, I finally faced my son. Instead of excuses, he showed me a more complicated failure. Years of entanglement with the Conways through panic and manipulation. His confession didn't absolve him, but calling the house transfer a loyalty test was the first glimpse of the boy I remembered. As that painful truth shifted my understanding, Agent Rowan rushed in with news that bent the case in a darker direction. Despite everything, I wondered if a path forward might exist, not back to what was, but toward something more honest. Rowan led us to a small conference room. Carmen followed, unusually tight-lipped. "What happened?" I asked as the door clicked shut. "New warrants tied to the Conways," Rowan said, setting a folder on the table. "A Dallas team found something you need to see." She spread photographs: hospital room, equipment, a patient. "I don't understand," I began, then froze. The patient was me, unconscious, wired to monitors in the ICU during my stay. "These were in a hidden safe in Victor Conway's Dallas office," Rowan said. She added another stack: my medical records, doctor's notes, medication orders, clinical charts, materials that should be locked inside Desert Valley Medical Center. "How did they get these?" Carmen asked, already seeing the implications. "That's our concern," Rowan said. "Timestamps don't match visiting hours, and these documents include data family wouldn't have." A shiver ran through me. "An insider?" Rowan nodded. "A nurse accessed your chart repeatedly when neither Ethan nor Natalie was present. Phone records show multiple calls to Victor." "But why?" I whispered. Carmen went pale, scanning notes. "Elena, look at this dosage change." I followed her finger. Post-op pain management altered. The original prescription crossed out and replaced by a higher dose, in different handwriting. "Your recovery took longer than normal," Rowan said carefully. "The infection that kept you 21 days instead of 5 to 7. We're investigating whether it was deliberately caused." The implication hit like a blow. "Are you saying they tried to?" "We're not accusing anyone yet," Rowan said. "But we are investigating whether someone prolonged your hospitalization to give the Conways more time." I gripped the table until my knuckles hurt. The idea that someone manipulated my care, risking my life, was almost beyond grasp. "Does Ethan know?" "Not yet," Rowan said. "We wanted you to hear first." Carmen covered my hand, voice grave. "If someone altered your care, this escalates. We're not just talking fraud and elder abuse anymore." "I know," I said, unable to hear the next word spoken aloud. "There's something else," Rowan added, wincing. "We found a life insurance policy taken out 6 months ago. Beneficiary, Ethan Cole." The room tilted. "He knew," I whispered, feeling the last pieces of hope collapse. "He had to." "Not necessarily," Rowan warned. "The application bears his signature, but we've already documented other forgeries." I closed my eyes against another wave of betrayal. If Ethan knew, if he signed with knowledge, then the boy I thought I saw in that room was a mirage. "I need to see him," I said, opening my eyes with new resolve. Now, with this information, we advise I need to see his face when he hears it, I said. 21 years in compliance and a lifetime as a mother gave me a sixth sense for lies. I had to look him in the eyes when this bomb fell. Rowan hesitated, then nodded. We were going to question him anyway. If you insist, we can arrange it. Back in the room, Ethan and his lawyer spoke in low tones. Reed sat up as Rowan entered. Agent, my client has cooperated fully, if you're implying. I'm asking for an explanation, Rowan said, laying out the documents. I can't explain what I don't know, Ethan said, panic rising. Natalie handled our insurance. She said we were updating policies. I signed whatever she put in front of me. The fear in his eyes wasn't just about charges. It was shock at the possibility of what had been done. I believed he had known about the medical manipulation. Do you understand what this means? I asked softly. Your wife and her parents may have planned something far worse than theft. He covered his face, shoulders shaking. Oh, God, he whispered. What did I let happen? Watching my son confront that abyss, compassion stunned me. He had done terrible things. He had betrayed me. But he was also a target of the Conways, a pawn in a darker game than he understood. I need to amend my statement, he said suddenly, looking up with resolve. I'll tell you everything I know about Natalie and her parents. Everything. A devastating twist shattered what remained of my certainty. Evidence suggested the Conways had deliberately complicated my recovery, possibly endangering my life. Most shocking was the insurance policy with Ethan as beneficiary. When confronted, his raw horror told me what I needed to know. As monstrous as this part was, he wasn't in on it. His resolve to reveal everything hinted that even darker secrets were buried. My anger stayed, but a thread of understanding tugged through it. 2 weeks later, Agent Keene spread a map across a conference table. 17 properties, same methods, same shells, all tied to the Conways. I'd been moved to an FBI safe apartment known only to Carmen and the case team. The investigation had ballooned, wider and uglier than we first imagined. And the nurse? I asked, the question that haunted me. Miranda Jenkins, Rowan said, sliding a personnel file. Post-op unit, 3 years, several payments from a Conway shell, over $25,000 in 6 months. She admits to altering meds? I needed it said. Keene and Rowan traded a look. She's cooperating, Keene said. She says she adjusted dosages and introduced mild bacterial contamination during IV changes to extend your stay. My stomach rolled at the clinical phrasing, a polite way to describe calculated harm. She could have killed me. She claims she calibrated for prolonged hospitalization without lethal risk, Rowan said, disgust in her voice. And Natalie? I asked, already knowing. Victor made initial contact. Keene tapped his notes. Natalie planned details. Texts show precise questions about your meds, schedule, projected discharge. I closed my eyes. My daughter-in-law prolonged my suffering to buy time. And Ethan? Carmen asked the question I couldn't. No evidence he knew about medical manipulation, Rowan said. His cooperation is extensive and appears genuine. The DA considers his testimony vital relief, small but real. My son's betrayal stayed heavy, but he hadn't conspired to harm me physically. It mattered. Anything else? Keene slid another folder. From Natalie's private email, messages with her parents going back nearly 2 years. Isolate you from friends, take control of your finances, then move you to a care facility once everything's legally finalized. Cold words made my hand shake. They'd targeted me long before the operation, seeing age as an opportunity. My hospitalization just sped the clock. And this, Rowan added, placing a glossy brochure and an email. A luxury retirement community. Natalie's note. Perfect for Elena once everything is finalized. Isolated, minimal oversight. Memory unit admits without much documentation. Once she's in, we control all access. They hadn't just planned to rob me, they planned to bury me alive in paperwork and locked doors. There will be additional charges, Rowan said. Elder abuse, conspiracy, and possibly attempted homicide, depending on how the prosecutor frames the medical tampering. I nodded, breath steadying. The scale of what they'd planned, my finances, freedom, dignity, was breathtaking. Like, when can I go home? The question had burned for weeks. The forensic team cleared your residence yesterday, Keene said. You can return, though we recommend confirming security first. Today, I said, I need to be in my own space. I'll stay the first few days, Carmen said, squeezing my hand. We'll add security. Rowan nodded. One more thing. Ethan asked to see you again. He's being moved to a minimum security facility pending trial and wants to meet before the transfer. My first instinct, refuse. The wound was still raw, but the mother in me, the part that remembered the boy, couldn't say no. Tomorrow morning, Rowan said when I agreed. After that, visits will be limited. That afternoon, I stood on my porch, key in hand, and paused. The facade looked the same, but I knew strangers had plotted my downfall within these walls. Take your time, Carmen said. It'll be hard. I drew a breath and turned the lock. The scent of home, old wood, books, faint lavender, was smothered by unfamiliar perfumes and cleaning products. Subtle violations were everywhere. The furniture had been nudged. My favorite orchid was gone. New curtains hung in the living room. In my study, Samuel's antique desk had been pivoted toward the door, instead of the window where he always worked, looking over the garden. That tiny change hit like a blow. They tried to erase our routines. We'll put it back, Carmen said, seeing my face. Make it yours again. I nodded and kept moving, noting every shift. In the bedroom, my clothes were replaced by Natalie's sleek suits. My jewelry box had been emptied. The pieces Samuel gave me over a lifetime. Gone. Rowan had told me they'd recovered most of it from a Conway safe deposit box. It would be returned after processing. But the thought of strangers valuing those memories in dollars made my chest ache. In the kitchen, my handwritten recipe cards, my mother's, my grandmother's, had been tossed. In their place, glossy cookbooks that had never been opened, that cut deeper than any appraisal could. As I stood in the ruins of small intimacies, a calm settled. This house, these belongings, they had been violated, but they were still mine. I survived. I fought back. The Conways misjudged me, my resilience, resources, and resolve. I'm staying, I said to Carmen, tonight, in my home. Are you sure? She asked. We could start fresh in the morning. I'm sure, I said, strength flowing back into my voice. They won't keep me out one more night. Dusk fell. I sat on the back porch with tea, watching twilight soften the garden Samuel and I planted. The roses needed pruning, the hydrangeas sagged. But the heart of what we created remained. Tomorrow would bring hard conversations with Ethan, more hearings, the slow rebuild of house and life. Tonight, I reclaimed my space. It was a beginning. As the case grew, I had to face a terrifying truth. Natalie and her parents planned far more than theft. Evidence showed deliberate interference with my recovery. the help of a corrupt nurse, and a plan to isolate me in a facility. Ethan seemed unaware of the darkest pieces, but the cruelty of what they'd prepared was staggering. Standing in my violated home, I realized the road ahead was long, not just to recover property, but to rebuild safety. Tomorrow, I'd meet my son before his transfer, an encounter I feared but couldn't avoid if I hoped to understand how our family shattered. The visitation room at the detention center was brighter than expected, fluorescence bouncing off pale yellow walls in a failed attempt at cheer. Ethan sat at a small table in a standard issue uniform that hung loose. He'd lost weight, his eyes were hollowed by sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat. "No lawyer. His choice." "You wanted to see me," I said calmly. "I'm here." He nodded, staring at his clenched hands. "They told me about the nurse, what Natalie and her parents planned." "Yes," I said, and waited. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know." His voice wavered. "I knew they wanted your house, your money. That was horrible enough. I never imagined they would." He couldn't finish. "I believe you," I said simply. His head snapped up. "You believe me about that?" "I've seen enough to think you didn't know about the medical part or the plan to lock me away. But you did know they were taking everything else. And you helped." He flinched but didn't deny it. "Yes. Why?" The question that hunted me finally stood in the light. "You had every advantage. We taught you integrity. What happened?" He sat in silence a long time. "I ask myself that nightly," he said at last. The easy answer: I was weak. Afraid of losing Natalie if I didn't comply. Afraid of what Victor would expose if I resisted. The hard answer? He met my eyes. I decided I deserved more than I'd earned, and that cheating was fine if it got me there. I became someone I don't recognize, someone Dad would be ashamed of. Samuel's name pierced me, his hopes for our son, the man he wanted him to be. He would be disappointed, I said. I am too. But what would have disappointed him most isn't that you failed, it's that you abandoned your principles to hide it. Ethan nodded, accepting it. The prosecutors offered a deal, 5 years, maybe 3 with good behavior, in exchange for full testimony against Natalie and her parents. "Will you take it?" "Yes," he said. "It's more mercy than I deserve." Silence stretched, heavy with consequence. My son would spend years in prison. The future Samuel and I dreamed for him ended under fluorescent lights. "I found something in the house," I said, changing lanes. "In your father's desk." I pulled a worn envelope from my purse. "He wrote you a letter before he died, meant for when you needed it most." I think that's now Ethan's hand trembled as he traced his name in Samuel's handwriting. "I didn't know." "He wrote several," I said. "This was the last." He opened it carefully, as if the paper might tear. I watched emotions move across his face. Pain, shame, then a steadier determination. He folded it gently and pressed it to his chest before sliding it back into the envelope. "Thank you," he said, voice firmer. I needed his voice, even like this. "What will you do after?" I asked. "When you've served your time?" He seemed surprised. Maybe hadn't let himself imagine beyond punishment. "I don't know," he said. "Career gone, finances gone, reputation." He trailed off. "You'll have to rebuild," I said. "Not just your life, your moral core." "That's the hardest work, I know." He hesitated, then asked what weighed on him most. "Will you ever forgive me?" I considered, refusing to hand him easy words. "Forgiveness isn't a switch," I said. "It's a process. Right now, I'm still sifting through pain and betrayal." I don't know if full forgiveness is possible, but this is true. You are still my son. That doesn't change. What our relationship becomes depends on what you do from this moment forward. He nodded, accepting the only honest answer. That's fair. Our time was nearly up. A guard approached. As we stood, he asked, "The house. Will you stay there?" "Yes," I said firmly. "It's my home. I won't let what they did drive me out of the life Samuel and I built." "Good," he whispered. He'd want that. Watching him go, shoulders squared despite everything, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. Not healing, that would take time, but the beginning of understanding. Outside, Carmen waited in the car. Silent support I'd learned to trust. "How was it?" she asked. "As well as it could be," I said, watching the leaves swirl in the lot. He took the plea. "How do you feel?" I gave the honest inventory. Sad, relieved, still angry, but less so. As we drove toward my reclaimed home, I thought about the arc of these months, from raw betrayal to a fight for justice, from the horror of what was planned for me to this fragile moment of clarity. The road ahead stayed hard. Trials for Natalie and her parents, securing assets, rebuilding a life, maybe rebuilding a bond with my son. But for the first time since waking after surgery, to find my world ruined, I felt real hope. Not because it would be easy, but because I'd found a strength I didn't know I had. We turned onto my street as the sunset gilded my facade, signaling new beginnings after so many endings. In that harsh visiting room, I finally heard my son tell the truth. Not excuses, but failures owned. He was horrified by the harm planned against me and took responsibility for what he stole, accepting prison. I gave him Samuel's last gift, a letter saved for when he'd need it most. Forgiveness had no tidy answer, only an honest next step. Leaving the center, I felt clarity. Not healing yet, but the first step toward our new reality. With my house being restored and justice set in motion, I found myself looking forward, not trapped in the past, aware of a strength I hadn't known I carried. "That's the last one," Carmen said 6 months later, placing our family portrait on the new shelf in my living room. Half a year since that visit, half a year of rebuilding my home, finances, and safety. "It looks right," I said, scanning the room. The furniture was back in place. Fresh curtains, my taste, not theirs. The last traces of the Conways were erased. "Better than right," Carmen said, nodding toward the upgraded security panel. "Safer than ever." She was right. Everything we lived through led to real improvements. Reinforced locks, layered security, tightened financial protocols. The vulnerabilities they exploited were identified and sealed. "The roses are blooming," I added, looking out at the garden where spring shoots pushed through. Hours of replanting had been a quiet therapy, my hands back in the soil of my life. Carmen caught the metaphor and smiled. With care and time, things return. The legal progress was significant. Natalie and her parents faced an avalanche: fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, with attempted homicide attached to the medical tampering. The evidence, bolstered by Ethan's testimony, was overwhelming. To avoid trials and longer terms, they took pleas. Victor, 20 years, Lila, 15, Natalie, 18. Their network spanned 3 states. The nurse who altered my care received 8 years, reduced to 5, for testifying about other cases. 2 prior deaths tied to Conway properties were reopened as possible homicides. Our neighborhood escaped their rezoning grab. Properties they'd taken were being returned to rightful owners or heirs. The community rallied, a new support network to protect seniors from scams. Have you decided about the visit? Carmen asked, handing me iced tea. She meant Ethan's latest request. 3 months into serving time at a minimum security facility, he'd asked if I'd come. His letters arrived weekly, never presuming forgiveness, always acknowledging harm, describing what he was doing to make amends. I think I'll go, I said, surprised at my own certainty. Not next week, garden club fundraiser, but the week after. Carmen nodded, neutral. You seem calmer than a month ago. I dreamed of Samuel last night, I said, and the memory warmed me. We were on the porch swing, just talking. He said something I can't forget. Healing doesn't mean erasing the wound. It means finding purpose in the scar. Carmen smiled softly. Very Samuel. I woke thinking of Ethan and how some wounds never fully close, but can still lead to meaning, not a return to before, forward to something new. The doorbell rang. On the tablet screen, a courier held a large bouquet. Expecting flowers? Carmen asked. No, I said, a flicker of old wariness passing. Even with new security, trust takes time. Carmen checked credentials and brought in lilies and irises, my favorites. The card, thinking of you on your birthday, your neighbor, Eleanor Jameson. I smiled. Eleanor moved across the street 3 months ago. A retired literature professor with quick wit and familiar tastes. We'd built a gentle friendship, gardening tips, book swaps. She'd lost her husband around when I lost Samuel. A bond formed instantly. A lovely gesture, Carmen said. You're building a strong community. She was right. After the Conway ordeal, I chose connection over retreat. The neighborhood book club now met monthly in my living room. I volunteered twice a week at the senior center. Found family there. The garden club named me lead for the heirloom rose show. These genuine ties became my greatest defense against future vulnerability. I've been thinking about the foundation, I said, as we settled onto the porch swing. Samuel Rivera Medical Research, remember? He'd started it to fund studies on the rare heart condition that took him. What about it? I want to expand its mission, I said. Add a division for elder protection, legal support, fraud prevention, education, victim services. Carmen's eyes lit. Turning your experience into a shield for others. Exactly. They picked dozens of victims before me. Most didn't have my resources or the know-how to fight. I want to change that. He'd be proud, Carmen said warmly. I think so, I said, looking at the street where I'd rebuilt home and safety, finding purpose in the scar, like he said. Evening settled. We watched neighbors come home. Kids' laughter skittered down the block. The pulse of community hummed around us. The trauma would never vanish. Flashbacks would flare. But the scars no longer defined my days. They'd become a source of wisdom, empathy, and purpose. Later, when Carmen left, I sat at Samuel's desk, now turned back to face the garden, and drafted the new division's plan. It felt like a circle closing. The Conways chose me because they saw a fragile, exploitable widow. The foundation would turn that pain into protection for many. Tomorrow would be busy. A board meeting, planning my visit to Ethan, tending the beds we reclaimed. But for the first time in months, I felt real excitement, not just grit. My phone rang. Eleanor, confirming the flowers arrived, and inviting me to a chamber concert next weekend. As we chatted, I realized how different life felt 6 months after reclaiming my home. Betrayal cracked something essential in me. Trust in family, the safety of familiar spaces. But out of that rupture came new strengths, new bonds, and a clearer sense of what matters. Finding purpose in the scar, I murmured when we hung up. Samuel's wisdom didn't erase the wound, but it allowed it to transform into meaning, even something like beauty, over time. 6 months after facing my son, I'm in a season of unexpected renewal. With the house restored and the garden alive, I've watched Natalie and her parents receive long sentences and seen a predatory network dismantled. Our neighborhood pulled together. I built new friendships that color my days. When Ethan asked me to visit again, I said yes, not to erase what happened, but to find meaning in it. That purpose is taking shape as I expand Samuel's foundation to include elder protection, turning my ordeal into a safeguard for others. As I settle into this new chapter, I know the betrayal broke something, but it also opened space for growth, connection, and deeper wisdom about what truly matters. In the time I have left, this story reminds us that those who prey on others are eventually unmasked, and those who keep an upright heart will find justice and peace.